Yes, Marvel Anime, the project that looked at the post Iron Man MCU Go Rush of 2009 and decided the appropriate response was, you know what the Japanese market really needs? Tony Stark explaining his feelings in subtitles while a willowy, high cheekbone Bishonen, who is theoretically Wolverine, mopes through Osaka in skinny jeans. And if you think Marvel Token Souls was the first attempt at putting your favorite superheroes into anime form, think again. Actually, think back 15 years later to a deal struck between Marvel and the acclaimed Japanese animation studio behind Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. Let's keep it 100. In 2009, Marvel sat down with Madhouse. Yes, that Madhouse, the studio behind Death Note, Claymore, and the kind of animation that removes your jaw from its socket and said, here are four of our biggest properties. Go wild, make them Japanese. Warren Ellis will write the outlines. Knock yourselves out. The result was four 12-episode series, Iron Man, Wolverine, X-Men, and Blade, that aired on Animax in Japan, briefly colonized the dying embers of G4 in the US, and then vanished from public consciousness so completely that most Marvel fans today will look at you with genuine confusion if you bring them up, which is honestly the most Marvel thing imaginable. To understand how four animated series by a generally legendary studio fell into the memory hole, you need to understand the very specific moment that produced them. It's 2009. Iron Man just made $1 billion. The MCU is a running train, but Japan is a different beast. Manga and anime have their deeply entrenched superhero traditions, and the American cape and tights model doesn't carry the same cultural weight in Akihara that it does in Burbank. Marvel's solution announced that San Diego Comic-Con 2009 was elegant in theory, partner with Madhouse, grand genuine creative freedom. Let them reimagine the characters for a Japanese audience. Simon Phillips, then president of Marvel International, actually said, and I quote, it will create an entire parallel universe for Marvel. And Madhouse president Jungo Marura confirmed that Marvel gave them actual structural freedom. Not here are your guardrails. Actual freedom. Warren Ellis, who by this point had written Planetary, Next Wave, and the kind of comics that make other comics look embarrassed, plotted the four series. Madhouse writers then scripted each one separately, different directors, different tones, different degrees of what is happening on screen. The shows aired sequentially on Animax, Iron Man in autumn 2010, Wolverine in winter 2011, X-Men in spring, Blade closing out the run in September. In the US, G4 broadcasts all four in 2011 and 2012 respectively. Then, silence. Tony Stark goes to Japan to build an arc reactor power station and, for reasons never fully convincing, retire. His replacement armor, Iron Man Dio, immediately goes berserk on launch day because, of course it does, a villainous organization called the Zodiac, apparently assembled from leftover astrology app subscribers, is pulling the strings. Then the show's actual emotional payload lands. Ho Yinshin, the man who saved Tony's life in the cave, is alive, and he's the one controlling Dio. That is a generally interesting idea because in the American canon, Yinsen dies in that cave. His sacrifice is the moral foundation of the Iron Man origin, making him the antagonist, not evil, but weaponized by grief. Is exactly the kind of thing Madhouse should have built an entire series around. And damn, does the show not do that consistently. But when it works, it startles. Toshiki Inu scripted this one that came in writer, which explains both the tokusatsu rhythm of the episodic structure and some of the weirder tonal swings, while Adrian Pastor voiced Tony Stark in English. Now, let's fast forward to January 2011, and here we are, the most controversial, most aesthetically bewildering of the four. The premise is the Frank Miller and Chris Claremont 1982 Wolverine Limited series. Logan goes to Japan, rescues girlfriend Mariko Yashida from crime lord father Shinjin, one of the most beloved stories in X-Men history. Madhouse looked at Logan, 5'3", 250 pounds, carved from granite by a bear, and drew him as a 6'2" willowy anime protagonist with the bone structure of someone who has never looked at a steak. And the Western internet lost its effing mind, predictably, of course. And yet, And yet, divorced from expectations of what Wolverine is supposed to look like, the actual show is grim, focused, and well paced. The Japan setting works. Bella Ventimiglia voiced Logan with genuinely quiet menace. Yukio gets a real arc while Shinjin is legitimately threatening. The third series is the most ambitious and the most uneven. Cyclops, Storm, Beast, Wolverine, and new character armor. Hisako Ichiki, a Japanese teenager with psionic exoskeleton powers, travels to Tohoku following a mutant crisis. Here's the timeline. The show was produced through 2010. It aired in Japan in April 2011 in Tohoku 3 weeks after the earthquake and tsunami. The location was already written. The show aired anyway. Deliciously bleak production timing. The universe deadpanning directly at the writers. Warren Ellis co-wrote this one directly. The U-Men, a cult that harvests mutant organs, is appropriately horrifying. Scott Summers spends exactly long enough being emotionally useless before rallying. Peak X-Men. And finally, what you all waited for, Blade, arguably the best of the four, certainly the most forgotten. Scripted by Kenta Fukasaku, son of Kinji Fukasaku, director of the legendary Battle Royale cult classic, which is either the most appropriate legacy hire in animation history or a completely accidental one. Blade sweeps across Southeast Asia hunting vampires and closing in on Deacon Frost. It's the darkest, most mature of the four. It doesn't try to explain why Blade specifically needs to be in Japan. It gives him the entire region and earns it. And then nobody watched because it aired last on a network that was already spiritually deceased. So let's keep it a buck. This was a structural failure wrapped around intermediately brilliant execution. The central problem was the Japan mandate. Every single series required the hero to travel to Japan or Asia because the business deal was built around making these properties feel local to a Japanese audience. Logical commercial decision, creatively exhausting constraint when you're 4 series deep, and the question, why is everyone in Japan, is getting harder to answer. The secondary problem was inconsistency. Madhouse was brilliant, but each series had different directors, different writers, different visual philosophies. Iron Man and Wolverine feel like different studios made them. The anthology structure that was supposed to be a feature became a bug. No unifying identity, no through line, no universe to speak of. What there was? Moments, individual episodes that generally startled, animation sequences that justified the entire enterprise. Character beats the American productions wouldn't have touched in 2010. The ambition was real, the execution was scattered, and the universe shrugged and moved the hell on. Spoiler alert, none of the 4 series got a second season. G4 folded its gaming identity in 2012, relaunched as Esquire Network in 2013, and became a textbook case in what happens when you try to rebrand your way out of an identity crisis. Madhouse, following the Marvel project, lost several key creative staff. Satoshi Kon had died in 2010, and the studio entered a prolonged period of upheaval that fundamentally changed its output. Marvel extracted 2 direct-to-video films from the arrangement: Iron Man, Rise of Technivore. In 2013, Avengers Confidential, Black Widow, and The Punisher in 2014, before the partnership quietly wound down. The shows never found a proper streaming home. They are not on Disney Plus. They exist in a licensing gray zone, physically available in certain markets like eBay, but practically invisible. If you want to watch them today, you will work for it. Now, here's what the Marvel Anime project actually was. Viewed from sufficient distance, it was Marvel's first serious attempt at building a generally parallel creative universe, not an alternate comics timeline, not a what if, but a structural, separate, internationally minded reimagining of its own mythology. They didn't get it right. The constraints were too rigid, the through line too thin, the American distribution too half hearted. But the attempt matters because what these 48 episodes prove, even in the misses, is that these characters are architecturally flexible enough to survive translation. The Iron Man who processes survivor guilt in Japanese industry, the Wolverine who walks through feudal family tragedy in Osaka, the X-Men dropped into a post-disaster Tohoku like a metaphor someone forgot to file away, and Blade hunting through the moral landscape of Southeast Asia. These versions don't replace the originals, of course, because they don't need to. They're evidence of something stranger that even Marvel's most iconic properties are at their core vehicles, or for whatever the storyteller actually wants to say. The four suits are still out there. Nobody repossessed them. They're just waiting. Four shows, four heroes dropped into someone else's mythology and told to make it work. 48 episodes that aired were briefly remarkable and got left in the schedule ledger of a network that no longer exists. Somebody has to keep track. If you want general video essays on cult television, retro animation, and forgotten pop culture, subscribe to Pulp Vision.